So, I told Hadai that the class may be about baptism piracy, or lobsters in motion, or something else. So we'll see. He's interested to see what is that going to be about. So, I want you to look at this screen and tell me if you can see the people that are hidden behind. If you look carefully, just look at it. And you may also see some letters. Raise your hand if you see anything. Anybody see anything? Hadai?
I see a face.
You see a face? Okay. Janaki?
I feel like my mind is just playing tricks on me, but I feel like I can see like truth written.
Truth. Okay.
Like a word.
I don't see anything.
Okay. You don't know, anybody see like a concert, anything like that? Okay. Okay. Now, what do you hear? Can you turn it up? Is it baptism piracy? Or is it lactates in pharmacy? Is it Bart Simpson bouncing? I'm chasing Martian. What do you hear?
I hear that is embarrassing.
That is embarrassing. Anything? Anybody else heard anything else?
Pharmacy,
Pharmacy.
lobsters.
Anybody hear baptism piracy? So this is called the expectation effect. Let's see if, what do you see here? Do any of you see like a battle? A man lying down? Do you see a man lying down? What do you see? It's actually not a man lying down. Do you see a map? Or here, do you see a cow? Just squint your eyes a little bit. Do you see the cow? You got the ears, nose, eyes. You see it?
Yeah.
Hadai still doesn't see it. So these, here, let's get, maybe if there's like no laser pointer. So that's the nose. Up there's two eyes, the ears.
Oh, now I see.
Now you see it. Can you, and it's there now. It's not going away, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you see here? You see a frog or a man? What do you see? So, this was the classic one. What do you see? A duck? It's a bird. Now, at the zoo in October, they're questioning people, and 80%, no, it was I think 90%, 80 or 90%, let's see. 90% saw a bird. But during Easter's time, 80% saw a rabbit, and 100% of the kids saw a rabbit. So, you actually don't believe what you see, but you actually see what you believe. Our perceptions, internal perceptions. It's actually, For example, the nerves in the eye, there's a certain number of nerves that are in the eye, but the amount of neurons that are behind that for the visual part of the brain are a whole lot more. So your eyes, just like a concave flat surface, and they take information, but your brain does the processing. And that processing is then presented to you. So that processing is taking in things that it's known before, and it comes in with various assumptions. Like just like if when you came into this room, you assume that there would be a floor there. You might have heard of the story of Duryodhan when he came in, and it looked like the floor, but it was water. And he was in a very magical, very mystical palace, and the floor, what looked like the floor was actually very still water. And what looked like water was actually the floor, and he was embarrassing himself. That was embarrassing. As the chant was. That's the real chant. So this is there's a whole lot of information about this. There's a nice book called The Expectation Effect by David Robinson. So many of you heard about placebos, or also nocebos. Nocebo is the opposite, where it increases pain, and placebos. So at first they thought this is just some kind of nuisance, or perhaps it is just people that are weak-minded, they're easily influenced. But they found out that placebos are not something psychological. They actually produce physiological effects. One thing they noticed that in World War II, they were low on morphine. And so people who had their limbs blown off and bones broken in 52 places, and if they were administered morphine, actually placebo morphine, it would be 90% effective as the regular morphine. And in fact, when you administer anti-pain and anti-inflammatory drugs like morphine, the knowledge that you're receiving it is very important. For example, doctors will have to double the dose for a patient that is not conscious of the, if it's just injected without their consciousness. If they're being told, excuse me, that they're being administered morphine, then it is 50% more effective. Not only is it 50% more effective, but your body, your brain, is like its own pharmacy. It produces its own opioids to counteract the pain that's in the body. And the proof of this is that they're anti-opioid medicines, and you could take a placebo, a fake morphine or a fake pain reliever, and then take an actual anti-opioid, and then the pain will come back. Irregardless if you knew the first one was a placebo. Or even if you knew that you took the anti-opioid, it still has an effect. So the placebo is actually, this expectation effect is your brain is actually a prediction machine. It takes information and then it reacts to it. Here's another example. This one man took 29 antidepressants. He was brought to the hospital. He had low blood pressure. He was suffering very terribly. And then they found out that actually what he took was a placebo. And they told him, and then the symptoms started to go away. But he was having low blood pressure. He was having very, very powerful. Another one was they had. There's so many experiments. One of them was they had people with glasses on. They say, how well can you read this in the glare of the sun? Try these glasses. And then they would give another group, these are expensive Ray-Ban glasses. And people are like, oh, I can read so much more. And they would be able to read so much more of the words. They also had another experiment where they took cadets. And first they gave them eye tests and see, as far down as you can go, what can they read? I don't know. I used to be, was it 2010? Like I could see what people could see at 10 feet, I could see at 20 feet. Like very, very good vision. I don't know if I have to check, see if it's still there. I think it's 2015. Better than 2020 still. So these cadets did an eye test, and then they said, okay, imagine yourself that you are graduates of the premier flight school for the military, and then they'd put them in a VR, and they had them read the numbers on planes that were there. And these numbers were actually smaller than the numbers that they could read during the eye test. But because of the expectation that a pilot has good vision. Now you can't change the shape of your eyeball because eyesight is also affected by the deformities or shapes of the eyeball, but the processing of it became more refined because of that expectation. There's many, many, many examples. This book has hundreds of them. And so this is what is called, as we said, I said that quote, are the defects of our cognition. This is one of the defects of our cognition. In Sanskrit, that is called Karna Pattava Brahma Pramada Vipralipsa. This is, you find this in our books like Chaitanya Charitamrita. So here's your first one is you have the deficiency of your sense organs. So how big is the sun? First of all, with the sense organs, you can't see things that are very far. Prabhupada gives example. The thing that is so clear, so close to you, you can't see your eyelid. The light goes off, but you can't actually observe and see the eyelid. And then if you take out logic, then the sun is like this big. It's a very small object in the sky. Then you have, as it's mentioned here in the book, you have processing errors. Your eyes see, the organs of perception see an object. But what happens behind that, the processing, that is then placed into your consciousness, is defective. So, for example, you might see in the ocean, you think, oh wow, I found silver, or I found gold. You're in the water and you're like, yes, I found some gold, but it's an oyster shell. Or the classical Vedanta example is, I saw this example directly. I was in India, and there was a kid walking, and his arm was shaking like this. He was walking, and following behind him was a big snake. But he was just a prankster. This is Vrindavan, and everyone is following Krishna, the biggest prankster. So he had a thin string attached to a rope, and he was shaking it while he was walking. So it looks like a snake is swallowing him. So that's the classic example. You mistake a rope for a snake. So you're attentive. You're conscious. But the processing that's going on, the organs of perception are taking in information, but the processing is not happening correctly. So you have a misconception. You have apramana, incorrect information. Then you have what is called pramada. Pramada means that you're unconscious. This is more about the subject, the person. So for example, a person may think, I am this body. So they're unconscious of their actual identity. So this is also called, both of these are like illusion. Actually, the first three are, you could say, illusion. The sun is illusory, appears to be small. And then you have the last one, deliberate deception. So despite having all these incapacities, despite of all these things, a person may think, a person may teach. A person says, like Srila Prabhupada, our teacher, says, I've got Brahma, I commit mistakes, I'm bewildered, I'm illusion, but I'm taking the position of a teacher. So teaching something that I may not actually know, that is called vipralipsa. Also, when we say sometimes, perhaps, maybe, or I think, and we're presenting something, but we don't actually know its validity, and we just, we call it speculation. So that could be in the category of vipralipsa. So what are the different ways that you gain information? From people? Books? Internet? How can you understand something, know something? Experience? Introspection? Nice, nice. So in the Vedic tradition, they describe 10 different sources of knowledge, and they kind of boil these 10 to basically 3. And so you have pratyaksha. Pratyaksha means things that you perceive. Aksha is like your eyes or your senses, and prati means something that's around or something that's close to your senses, something near to your senses. When your consciousness engages with your senses, like you could be in a cafe and there's all kinds of conversations going on, and you're not hearing the conversations unless you put your consciousness to it, isn't it? It's like when you can hear that person's conversation and that person's conversation and that person's conversation, but it takes the consciousness applied to it. So you have what is yet the sensory perception, which is when the senses contacts an object and the mind chooses to give it attention, to receive the knowledge that is there. And then that can be external, the senses, and it can be internal, the mind, like emotions, pain, love, hate, pleasure. And then you have what is called anuman, or logical inference. Now this starts with some kind of sense perception. Like you can't have a logical conclusion without seeing something first, or having prior, if you know that gravity makes things fall down, you have to see something, you have to experience gravity or feel gravity, and then there's the logic follows. So there's a perception that then follows the logic. So logical inference is you see a smoke over a mountain, and you conclude that there must be a fire, because smoke means fire. And the last one you mentioned also, books or internet. This is some kind of reliable testimony. Now, when we are discussing spiritual matters, if I want to know something that is beyond my perception, who here is not born in the United States? Where were you born?
I'm from
Hyderabad.
Hyderabad.
Telugu. Yes. So I don't know if it is your parents or maybe your parents' parents. They close their eyes, they think of Krishna, and they see NTR, Nandamukhi Taraka Ramarao.
Unfortunately, they're not big movie watchers. They're not big movie watchers.
Okay.
Yeah.
But pretty much anyone from
Yeah.
who was living in the 60s or 70s, if they were to think of Krishna, picture Krishna, they would see NTR.
Yeah.
That's the image that they see. Who else? Not born in the U.S. Yes, where?
Venezuela.
Venezuela. ¿Tú hablas español? Bueno. Anybody else? Where from?
India,
Maharashtra?
Maharashtra.
Karnataka?
Argentina.
Argentina. Sí, bueno. No. Buenos Aires? What?
Rosario.
Okay. Anybody else? So if we want to know what is happening in Argentina, what can we do? Which of these 3 is going to assist us? Reliable testimony. No, why don't we just use our senses? Like we get on the Brooklyn Temple's roof, and we take out a big telescope. Argentina! First it's got to be flat Earth. Then we have logical inference. If we want to know what's happening in Argentina, we may say, it's winter here, or it's about now spring. It must be spring there. Right? That's correct. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, that's good.
Is that correct? No, it's not correct. Yes.
Small connection.
Yes, because So, or if, like for example, if we want to know what's happening in Japan, if we may have a logical inference that if we have nothing, we don't know anything about Japan, but we take on from our own perspective, our own, like we say, a little like our box. We're looking inside our box, and then we may also have opposite understanding. So okay, say somebody is from Idaho. What food do they like to eat in Idaho? What vegetable? Potatoes. Yes. So someone in Idaho is like, people in Japan love potatoes. I love potatoes. People in Japan must love potatoes. That's their thing. Everybody in Japan loves potatoes. And someone comes in, they're like, no, you are potato-pomorphizing Japanese people. Somebody might say, you say God's a person, you're anthropomorphizing divinity. So you're potato-pomorphizing Japanese people. Japanese people hate potatoes. And then he said, how do you know that? Because they're not from Idaho. So it's like you have one conception, it's either positive or negative. Either it must be the same or it must be different. So it's like, I'm a person and therefore maybe God's a person. Or I'm a person, therefore God can't be a person. And so we're coming with different perspectives. But the problem is it's still in the box. Just like if we look at this painting. We have a beautiful painting of Chaitanya and Nityananda. They're dancing through, could be Mayapur or Nadia or Navadvip. They're, singing Hare Krishna. Now, what color are the eyes of the artists? Or is it a male or female who painted that? We can't get that information. We're just, that information is not provided there. So similarly, that's just like we want to understand about Japan from our perspective. We're limited. Therefore, we need some test. If it says a signature there, then we find somebody who knows that person or get some information. But that testimony should be tested. So it should be, like for example, there's like a Triborough bicycle run. And you go through like Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, or something like that. So if a little child drew you a map, and the map shows, it says, okay, there's like, from Manhattan, you go up, there's like Bronx, then there's Brooklyn, and then there's Manhattan at the top. And they present you this map. And if you have a little bit of information, you'll see, okay, this seems illogical. I'm not going to follow this map. So testimony should be tested. So if I want to learn about Japan and I get a broadcast from Japan, and in the broadcast it shows a giant lizard blowing blue fire, knocking down buildings. I may use my logical mind. I may also use the sense perception, the things that seem to make sense from this perspective, and see, okay, does that with that and the logic, does that make sense that Japan has a giant lizard knocking down buildings, or perhaps this is just like a nice movie or some kind of trick. I know there was the famous radio show, but there's a few pranks where people redo it, where they have like a newscast on, and it says like there's an alien invasion, and there's a lot of videos where people prank their spouses into convincing them that there's an alien with a nice news broadcast, and they're flipping out. But therefore, the reliable testimony should be tested. If we have just our sense perception, then again, I said the sun is small. If we just have logic without perception, then it doesn't work. But and also testimony. If we have testimony without logic, then that's called blind faith. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about both blind faith and blind doubt. Does anybody know what blind faith is? How would you sum it up? What's blind faith?
Without reasoning.
Without reasoning? And what is blind doubt?
Just for the purpose of reasoning.
So blind faith is when you have the answer, but you don't welcome any kind of questions. And blind doubt is when you have questions, but you're not welcoming any sort of answer. And so this is discussed in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Who here has read some of the Bhagavad Gita? Okay. Actually, can I get everyone's name? Madeline? Lydia? Raquel. Where are you from? Long Island.
Noelia.
Noelia? Archita? Bhavya. What does Bhavya mean?
It means something that's like big, but like spiritually big.
Okay. Bhavya is like related to bhav, is it?
Not quite. Bhav means emotion.
It also means existence. Okay. And Florencia? Yaje? Shilpa? Dipali? Jonathan? Sidhu. And one more time, sorry. AJ. Okay. So, in the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a person who basically 500 years ago inaugurated the Kirtan movement. And he visited a holy place of Vrindavan. And when he got there, everybody said, Krishna's in Vrindavan. Really? Yeah, Krishna's in Vrindavan. If you go to Kaliya Lake at night, Krishna's there, dancing on the hoods of Kaliya. You can see the brilliant, beautiful jewels glowing above the water. You know this one? Madhya Lila, chapter 18. And one of Lord Chaitanya's disciples said, oh, I want to go. And he's like, no. Krishna doesn't appear in this form in Kali Yuga. He said, this is Brahma, as we mentioned before. Not Brahma the god, but Brahma was, this is, as we see here, it is deficiency in the sense organs, or it's when we also when we're attentive, but there is a processing error. He said, actually, this is a fisherman. They found out that it was a fisherman at night with his lamp, and he was catching fishes. Yeah, go for it. So he was catching fish at night. So therefore, when we want to understand something spiritual, we don't want to approach it with any type of blind faith nor blind doubt. We want to approach in an intelligent way. And one of the steps is understanding the sources of information. There is a limitation of understanding divinity through sense perception, just like understanding that it's something that's beyond our senses, understanding just by logic. But all three are used in our perception. How many of you took the subway to get here? Okay. What train did you take? A train. Did you take it from up north, like up from Manhattan coming down, or from Queens? From Queens. So before, I don't know what's after here, but I know from coming from Manhattan, it's like you have Fulton Street, Chambers Street. What's after Chambers?
Well, J Street's first.
Yeah.
After
Chambers.
No, coming down
Oh,
from
coming down.
Fulton,
Fulton,
Chamber,
Chambers,
Parkway.
High Street.
High Street,
High Street.
Broadway, Lafayette.
No, that's
No,
that's
J
the-
Street, Metrotech,
J Street Metrotech, then
Hoyt, Skimmerheim. So this is like a map. It's information that's presented. And if someone presents you information that makes sense, your acceptance of that is called shraddha. It means faith. But shraddha is not faith like a blind faith or a very strong faith. It just means a willingness to participate. And so our spiritual life all begins with this. We get information, we see something, and it seems to make sense. I'm like, okay, let me get on this train. So that's shraddha, interest, just like a willingness to participate. Then when you get on the train, you say you're at 34th Street, Penn Station, and then it goes to 14th Street. Then it goes, after 14th Street is maybe Chambers, Canal, something, then Fulton or something like that. As it's progressing, as the various marker points are taking you to where it says it's going to take you, your faith is becoming realized. Your willingness to connect to that thing becomes not a faith, not a belief, but something you, as someone said the word, experience. In that sense, it becomes also this first one, pratyaksha, becomes something you actually experience yourself. What happens to you when you eat food? Give us one item. What happens to you when you eat food?
you get full.
You get full. Okay? Madeline?
You have this enjoyment. You know,
Taste and pleasure of the enjoyment and satiated. You get that's the full one. There's something else. There's something else that comes from food. Nourishment, yes. So this is in the book called the Bhagavatam. How many of you seen the Srimad Bhagavatam? It's an 18-volume set that we read every morning. Yeah. So Srimad Bhagavatam in the 11th canto, it says, Bhakti pareshana bhava vrakti anyacha chaisha chika eka kala tatada how does the last part go? Tushti pushti shutpai anagasham. The third line I messed up. So tushti is taste. Pushti is nourishment. And the last one is the hunger goes away. So in the same way, there is, the analogy is, just like when you take each bite, you're getting the pleasure of taste. Each bite, you're getting some nourishment. And each bite, you're getting, your hunger is starting to go away. So in the same way, when you connect to God through love, bhakti or devotional service, there is the pleasure in the connection itself, in the act of connecting. There is something that is compared to nourishment, and that's compared to awareness. You start to become more conscious. That was one of the previous defects of cognition, was a lack of consciousness. Number 3, pramada. You become more conscious, you become more aware. Srila Prabhupada, our teacher, he has a statement. He says, first become conscious, then become Krishna conscious. So you become more actual, so that's called, that's compared to nourishment. And the last one is a sense of indifference to material affairs, a lack of addiction or aversion, hating or desiring. You become indifferent to it. You're no longer chasing the carrot on the stick. Actually, this is a very good question. If someone were to present to you, this whole Indian philosophy that we're presenting, it's all just nonsense. The main thing is you just need to eat psychedelic mushrooms. And that's the deepest perception of divinity. What is a counterpoint to address that? What would you say?
No intoxicant.
No, but a person says that you can experience divinity just through mushrooms. That's the highest. What would be?
It's not wrong, but you come back down into your ego.
So you come back down into your ego. That's a good answer. Someone might say, well, you chant and then it goes back down to your ego.
Well, that way I think it's kind of natural. It's kind of like we're using the organism.
So it's internal versus getting something from the outside. Nice. Anything else? Temporary. Well, someone might say, well, why aren't you like a pure person? You've doing this thing, so it seems temporary for you also. So Arjuna asks in the Bhagavad Gita, what are the qualities of someone who's developed these things? And so the real test is the last item of those three things. When you eat food, the hunger is going away. And so if someone engages in like taking psychedelic mushrooms, generally we don't find that the person loses their taste for material things. That's the real test, that there's authentic spiritual activity or spiritual progress. The person has lost their taste in chasing after the proverbial carrot on the stick. They're lost their taste for chasing after temporary. Lost their taste of doing things that we all have done things that are detrimental for ourselves, but due to strong desire, we still find ourselves doing those things. It could be even small things like doom scrolling on Instagram or TikTok and YouTube. Like, I know this is not good for me. This is garbaging my brain, but still I'm doing it. So there's things like that we have, what to speak of darker things. Now, we don't find that the psychedelic mushrooms or this or that are actually alleviating these things. That's the real test. Is the hunger going away? And when the hunger is going away, then it's like that's how we can see. It's like the train is getting closer and closer to its destination. So there's a lot more to say, but I would like to stop here and ask for you, what will you take home from this presentation? What questions you may have, and any reflections you have. So we'll start here.
I think I'm still stuck. You have like blind faith and blind doubt
Yes.
are the biggest takeaway for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And remember, how do you sum those two up? The blind faith and blind doubt.
Blind faith is something where
You have the... I have the
I
answer.
have the answers, yes, and
Please, no questions.
and blind doubt is the opposite way.
I have questions.
But don't give me that.
I don't want to answer. I just want to ask. So that's what Prabhupada uses a term. Blind faith and absurd inquiries means blind faith and blind doubt. This is in Bhagavad Gita. It's at 434, I should be. Yes. What is your takeaway?
My takeaway was that we know that like spiritual life is moving in the right direction if you are losing taste for material things that you know that are not good for you.
Nice. And one good question is, what is a material thing? That's a good question. What's a material thing? Is materialism lots of money? Or little money? In the Vedas and the Bhagavatam, it defines materialism as a sense of duality, when we see the energies of this world dualistically, when we see it separate from divinity. So if I find a wallet on the ground and I see it separate from its owner, and I want to exploit it or neglect it, that's materialism. But when I give it back to the owner, that's the reality. That's the spiritualism. So that's it. Hadai, what is any reflection, any takeaways?
I like that last point because a lot of people think that spiritualists have to be poor.
Yeah.
So it's not about being rich or being poor. You can be poor and still be materialist, but you can be rich and you can be a spiritualist. It depends on the vision about how you look at it.
Yeah. One person, two people can put in the same endeavor with and one will get an income of $20,000 a year, and the other one get $2 million a year. The same endeavor, same 8 hours a day or whatever. Because it's their karma. The other person might have had done some great charity in the past, or the other person may be, for their spiritual growth, their karma is to be a little poorer because it will help them not be, if they get too much, they'll become too entangled. Like Raghunath, he shares from Wisdom of the Sages, he shares that he met somebody who was a guitarist in a band, and the person was telling him, you should do a band and sing about spiritual topics. And he was like, but you don't do that. He said, but for me, if I got on the stage, it's about me being God rather than serving God. I know for me, even though I play music and I could like put a band and be on stage, for me, I know that's not going to help me. The way my mind works, it wouldn't. But for you, you could do it and do it in the proper consciousness. It wouldn't be detrimental for you. Sometimes you find that people win the lottery and then it ruins their life. They become very quickly bankrupt and they lose all their family and friends. What's your takeaway?
More of like a question.
Oh, please.
What's the correlation with placebo and spiritual growth?
Nice. So one of the points of this is we want to do what is called biohacking. We understand that how our minds work, and having a clear mindset and a positive mindset towards spiritual life. Like for example, the whole placebo or all the things that were mentioned in this book. I'll bring it back up. Expectation effect. They found out that even doing the same activity, but by having having a different consciousness towards that activity, would produce different results in the body. For example, they had hotel workers, and they told a certain group of hotel workers that we've kept track of the activity that you're doing, and this activity this type of exercise is the same amount as doing 1 hour at the gym every day. And those people, after a month, their blood pressure went down, they started to become more fit, and they're just doing the same activity. But even the body responds in a certain way. If you're you get injured and you're at the hospital, then your pain will actually go down because your mind perceives that care is now there. And therefore there's no need for the pain because you're in the even people who were, like I said, they had their limbs blown off and they were like, do you feel any pain? They're like, no, because they were so happy about being saved from that situation. So we can learn how to use this prediction machine of their mind in a way that we use our logic, understand, okay, these are the things that are good for me, these are the things that are progressive for me, therefore let me encourage my mind in a certain way so I can get the most benefit out of that. Therefore, like I said, when we chant this mantra, it helps us be attentive. That was also just even subconsciously, just we can understand. There's benefit there, but it's also when we're conscious of the benefits that we're doing, of the things that we're doing, then it helps us.
But also, like, even if hypnotized, who cares if it works?
Yes. Yes.
It worked. Who cares?
It works. Who cares? Krishna says in the pastime of the Govardhan Lila, it says when you understand something, then it becomes more effective. The chanting works. Like for example, we would go on kirtan at the Halloween block party in Dallas. It was about 50,000 people. And I can't imagine how someone could logically understand what they're doing, because we'd have people join us, and they would join us for 3 hours to like 2 a.m. And they would have to ask themselves this question. If they were smart, they could ask this question the next day. How could I be singing the same thing for 3 hours? There's got to be something there. If we were all hired by Coca-Cola and we were out there singing Coca-Cola, Cola-Cola, and it was funny or whatever, and they put a lot of money into the whole presentation, it could go on for a few minutes and people would think it's funny. But for hours, the same exact thing. The law of material energy is the law of diminishing returns. It gets older and older, it becomes stale. And the way you can test the mantra is that it's ever fresh. You can, even if you, as you said, even if you don't know, there's some perception, there's a pratyaksha. You taste something, you experience. There's something in the sound vibration. For example, I was a monk selling books on the streets of Portland, Oregon, and someone asked me, what's my name? I said, Nityananda. And then I saw him a few days later. He said, you know what? I was trying to remember your name, and I went home and I was like, Nityananda. Nityananda, 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 Nityananda. And he said, I don't know why. I started singing it. And I felt really good. The guy didn't have any of our books. He didn't know our philosophy or anything. But Nityananda is a name of Krishna himself in the form of his eternal brother, Nityananda there. Krishna in 2 different forms. And he was feeling it. Nitya means eternal, ananda, bliss. He was feeling this eternal bliss. He had no idea what he was doing. He was just like trying to remember this guy, this monk he met on the street. Nityananda, Nityananda, Nityananda. So, as you said, it works. What's any takeaway or questions or reflections?
Yeah, I think for me, I like how you explain that sources of knowledge are Pratyaksha Praman, Anumana Praman, and Shabda Praman, and how it is important to have not have blind faith, and to tackle with the people who have blind doubt.
Very
So,
nice.
I used to think that, I do have blind faith in God, so what? But when people used to ask questions to me, then I used to, get entangled into this. So, yeah, with time I understood, so the Shastra knowledge is very important.
Yeah, it's like the faith is like the gas.
Yeah.
You just step on the gas, that's dangerous.
You cannot go long with blind faith.
And then doubt is like the brake. And if you just step on the brake only, nothing's happening. You're making no progress. Therefore, later in the Gita, he says, for the doubting soul, and the Bhagavad Gita, from start to finish, is full of doubts. 18 chapters, 9 start with a doubt, and the other 9 start with an implied doubt. So Arjuna is doubting the entire time. But it's not a debilitating doubt where the person has information that makes sense, but they're not willing to even engage with it. So it's not just slamming on the brake and just stuck in the middle of the highway, nor is it gas going on crazy. It's a proper use of both of these things. The eagerness and interest and questioning, shamshaya. Thank you. What's any takeaway? Yes?
So I did like the concept of this perception, initially when we started off, we try to believe what our eye sees.
Actually, just to let you know, there's nothing in this. This is just static, sorry. We just... That's the expectation. I said, do you see the faces? Do you see the letters?
The cow one, and conscious first so that we can be Krishna conscious. So that is what I feel.
Thank you, thank you. And then what's your
I was gonna say that too, the idea of perception, that we see or act from what we know, or right?
Yeah, that's what the quote, what's that quote? And
I'm trying to figure out, is there a way that I can not be susceptible to the expectation effect?
that's just how the brain works. If you can become fully self-realized, then it's described that you know the three modes of material nature. You heard this description of the three gunas. So each one is a more sense of entanglement. Like Tamagun is like being tied with 3 ropes, Rajagun 2 ropes, and Sattvagun 1 rope, and then Sudasattva, clarity. So the Yoga Sutras describe the mind as like a crystal. When it's clean, you put that crystal next to something and it reflects it perfectly. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes sattva is when all the gates of knowledge are illuminated clearly. Everything, you're seeing things with a clear perspective. And so as we raise our consciousness up, then we see things with a more clear perspective. But we still have, this, like for example, one time a magician was visiting Srila Prabhupada and he was showing him all these magic tricks, and he said, go like this, and he snapped and the coin jumped out of his hand. And some of the disciples were like worried, like he's making fun of the Swami, or and one of the kind of key points here is that it's, the eyes may misperceive an object, but the main thing is we want to make sure we're not subject to pramada, which means a misconception of ourself. We understand the self. If our eyesight's bad, we may not be able to. That's not as important as understanding the internal perception, having that clear. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. And then behind you?
I didn't follow the end of the class. My question is, if psychedelics are giving you a spiritual experience, why not try them to get you closer to God?
So the refutation of it was that we have not seen that someone who's taken psychedelics loses their hunger for temporary things. So we don't find that someone who takes psychedelics loses a sense of pride, or loses a sense of a desire for sexual indulgences, or just chasing after temporary pleasures of this world. That we find in authentic spiritual progress. And so that's kind of the barometer of spiritual progress, is there's a releasing or a relievement of the desire to enjoy the temporary. As just like when you eat food, your hunger goes away. So if if you're eating something like
maybe if you're not practicing, also it could come back.
Like, what do they call it? Like,
chanting.
Yeah.
If you're not meditating, it could perhaps come back.
Yeah, it has to be steady. Nityam Bhagavatas. Like if you're eating, like what they call it, empty calories, or you're eating something, it doesn't really, it's like you're going to want to eat because it doesn't really have substance there. You're going to keep on wanting to eat. So when we're connecting with something authentic, our hunger should go away. So that was the monk who asked that question to us. It's like that was the real example. Is something that's going to be authentic is going to make your hunger go away. And behind there, yes. What's your takeaway? Our question, our reflection.
have a question.
Yes.
If you take the train with faith, with logic, that is going to guide you where you're going through all these stops, and the train doesn't go there, doesn't go forward, goes back instead, maybe weird stops, and you thought you were going to the right direction because you have faith and logical and because you understood the way, but it wasn't like that. Who is guiding the train?
Yeah. So that's why we said we don't want to have blind faith. If someone says, presents some type of spiritual philosophy or some type of mystic philosophy, and it doesn't seem to be working, then we may ask, is it in the part of the experimenters? Like maybe I'm not doing it as, like you have what is called hypothesis, experiment, result. First of all, is the hypothesis, does it make sense? Does this map, the map of this subway, was this drawn by a child? Is it really from MTA? If it's supposedly from MTA, does it make sense? Is it Manhattan, then Bronx, then Brooklyn? Does it actually make sense? So if someone says, here's this is God, and God sends all Chinese people to hell because they didn't join the right club and they're all going to burn and die eternally. And you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't really make sense. That doesn't seem like the all perfect being. It seems like an angry tyrant. It doesn't seem to fully make sense. Maybe some other personal, some human knowledge got mixed in there. It doesn't seem to add up correctly. So we first have to have a hypothesis that makes sense, and then if we're willing, then we can participate. And then as we participate, we see that something's not adding up. It's either the experiment's not done right, or the hypothesis, the actual practice is missing something. So we should always use our discernment, our intelligence. And then we can also see in everyone else, like here's the person who's practiced it. Here's the teacher who's practiced it. What is the result for them also? That's kind of one of the starting shraddha or interests. We see qualities in a person who's just like, if I see somebody who's able to ice skate amazingly, I may want, I want to learn from this person. They know this thing. They have some knowledge. Okay, I can learn from that person. Yes?
I guess I have a generalized question about how you came to a spiritual awakening yourself.
I'm trying to wake up. So I was born in Hawaii, and when I was a young kid, I had a sister who passed away, and she passed away when she was about 2 years old. And there's questions if God is all loving, all powerful, all knowing, then why does something like this happen? I wasn't born in a religious family. My father, I didn't live with my father. He was Jehovah's Witness. That was I didn't enjoy going to their church. It was not so exciting for a kid. But when I met a friend of mine, I had a friend in Hawaii when I was 14, and she was 13, and I spent a summer weekend at her house, and she would have a whole bunch of friends, and we would go out late at night, and we would talk about aliens, and government conspiracies, and reincarnation. And she would bring in all these cool things like reincarnation, the universal form, that you can see the trees as the hairs on the body of God, and the rivers are his veins, the sun and the moon are his eyes, and the rainbows are the color of his dress. I'm like, this is really nice and interesting. And she made prasadam. This is a 13-year-old girl who made spaghetti with basically maybe canned tomato sauce. There was no meatballs in it, but there was carrots in it. which is weird, and walnuts, which is weird. It wasn't like, but it was the most amazing thing I ever tasted. It was cooked by a 13-year-old. I was like, okay, and then she said she would make a garland. She had a big Prabhupada picture, and she would make a garland daily for Srila Prabhupada. And she had a giant, I don't know if it's, what do you call the Hawaiian flower in Sanskrit? The one they make leis. I don't think it's kadamba, but champa, maybe champa, yeah, I think it's champa, yeah. So she had a giant, so here's her house. You have her house, you cross the street, and there's the beach. And on the beach, at night, there's these little glow creatures that glow in the sand. And then there's the brilliance of the stars, and that's the setting that we're having these deep discussions. And she says, if you take a flower and make a garland and offer it in the service of Krishna, then the soul in the tree gets benefited. I was like, the tree? Like first of all, the whole animals, everything, the tree. So I went home, I told my mom I'm a vegetarian. I basically took a vow from that time, no intoxication, and I started visiting the temple when I was 14, and then I moved to Oregon and eventually became a monk at 20, and there's a whole story there.
Maybe we're running a little bit late, but if you'll be here for breakfast?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we can just take like whoever, if anyone else wants to share like one realization, like a short realization.
Yeah. Anything last over here? Madeline and Lydia. Any short reflections?
The beginning with like the expectation kind of trick that stuck with me. Yeah, I feel like as I'm getting older, I'm noticing that I'm more sensitive to stimuli and like my five senses. And so just reminding myself that sometimes it could be an illusion or there's some like layer of perception that is also part of like why everything feels so bothersome sometimes.
Thank you. Yeah, we wouldn't want to be operating under misconceptions because that is embarrassing. That is embarrassing. That is baptism piracy. Baptism piracy. And you find your brain fills in the gaps. If you're told, your brain will hear that. Thank you.
On Sunday. He's going to be also one of the monks that you'll have to come up with some questions and try to debunk. So yeah, try to get his association and ask him questions if you see him. And I just have a couple of announcements before we leave for lunch. One, I want to ask you, does anybody remember